Panasonic Leica 15mm f1.7 lens is a gorgeous looking little lens with a manual aperture ring and unique lens hood design. It is the one lens out of all Panasonic Leica Micro Four Thirds lens collections that most resembles a classic Leica M-mount lens design. The compact, simple, and elegant aesthetics is calling on you to pick it up and shoot with this lens. That's the brilliant part of a lens design on the outside. A handsome lens will naturally get picked up more and in turn gives you more opportunity to shoot than you would otherwise. The size of this lens is small, but I didn't expect it to be this small because looking at the product picture on Amazon doesn't really give you a sense of dimension. It is almost a pancake lens size, weighing only 115 grams. It sits comfortably on my GX80. In fact, this combo strikes a perfect balance and they fulfill each other's purpose brilliantly. In my opinion, it's the perfect size for rangefinder style camera body. In fact, it looks quite similar to the lens on the point-and-shoot LX100 series cameras. However, on a bigger camera like the Lumix G9 or GH5, this lens looks a little bit too small to my liking, and it feels like something's missing when I'm using it on G9 or GH5. The lens barrel is made of metal, including the lens hood. Solid build quality as all the products from Panasonic Leica collaboration. Beautiful engraving in Leica font is almost half the selling point of the lens. Flashy, but in a subtle way. The lens shade has a peculiar shape tapered towards the front end, exact opposite direction from most other lens hoods. I found the shape odd at first, but later warmed up to it, and it does add a little bit of fun uniqueness to its look. By the way, the lens hood is a little bit too loosely fitted on the lens, extremely easy to bump and loosen accidentally. Taking the lens hood off, it's still a very handsome lens, if not even more so. Despite the exceptional build quality, it does not offer weather sealing. On the side of the lens, there's an AF/MF switch, a very handy feature. Gotta appreciate Panasonic for putting it on such a tiny lens. The focus ring is smooth with low resistance. It's going to be difficult to find focus with fly-by-wire manual focus system. Luckily, the later model of Lumix cameras offer linear focus function that allows it to mimic a mechanical manual focus, making manual focusing much more intuitive. Aperture ring, a big selling point for this lens, is beautifully crafted. It has very mild but distinct clicks between each fraction of f-stops. I like how they put the A auto mode next to the maximum aperture f1.7, unlike some other manufacturers put it next to the highest f-stop, so that when I go from any aperture value to auto aperture control, I always start from f1.7. This way, when you go from high f-stop like 5.6 down to f1.7, even if you overshoot f1.7 and get to auto mode, you still get f1.7. So it's really fail-safe and convenient for anyone who needs to constantly switch between different f-stops and f1.7. The downside is that the aperture ring is actually very loose once again. Everything is just a little bit too loose on this lens. The aperture ring doesn't inspire much confidence when you are out and walking around. Very easy for your fingers to slip and slide it by accident. I wish they made it a little bit more stiff. 15mm is rather unique. It is full frame equivalent of 30mm, sitting right between two of the most popular focal lengths, 28mm and 35mm. I haven't seen any 30mm full frame equivalent prime lenses until doing research for this review. The only other lens I found is the Sony 20mm f2.8 for APS-C sensor coverage. I can't help but wonder, what does it mean? Why did they choose 15mm? Why not 17mm? Panasonic has a 14mm lens, a 20mm lens, but never a 17mm lens. Yes, Olympus has a couple of 17mm lenses, but I don't think that's the reason for Lumix to avoid 17mm. Honestly, I don't know, but it's nice that they're trying something new and different. 15 is actually pretty wide, which allows you to capture more landscape or day-to-day documentary style photographs, with just a touch tighter framing to bring out the subject in focus a little bit more. So yeah, you can't get much bokeh straight away. You need to get up close with this lens, get intimate with the subject you are shooting, thus create an image that builds closer relationship between audience and subject, especially in portraits. The angle of view of this 15mm lens sits right between 10mm and 25mm. Maybe it's all planned ahead by Panasonic because you can regard this lens as a mini version of the monster lens 10 to 25 f1.7. When you don't want to or cannot bring out the heavy 10 to 25, use this on GX80. On a trip, in crowded space, in precarious environment, you will feel much safer, lighter, more agile, and right at home with this tiny lens. And with a bit of work on your feet, it does a good job replacing 10 to 25 f1.7 in a pinch. Speaking of focal length, I think it's brilliant for environmental portrait or just casual portrait when you are going out with friends. Snap a picture or two absent-mindedly every now and then, and you will be surprised when you get home and check the result and see how fun these pictures turn out. As a wide-angle lens, it still barely works for vlogging purpose, given that you don't mind a little tighter framing. You do get more compression and background blur than typical vlogging lenses like 12mm and beyond, so if that's what you're looking for, it's perfect. There is a soft spot in the left region in images taken by this lens, in some situations I think, which could be an issue of this particular copy that I bought used. I haven't heard anything negative about the optical quality, so I can only assume it's just my lens or user error. The soft spot is kind of hard to find unless you pixel peep, which I do daily. Otherwise, it is very sharp lens across the frame, starting from f1.7 already. I always stop down to f4 to ensure the sharpness across frame in landscape because of the depth of field, but otherwise I never hesitate to shoot at a wide open f1.7. Slight magenta chromatic aberration can be found when having winter tree branches in overcast sky. Haven't really noticed it in other situations, so I'd say that it's generally very well controlled. When shooting against sunlight, sometimes there's purple flaring. It is rather distracting and should be avoided. Even with the lens hood, it doesn't help much. Autofocus is pretty quick in stills, especially when there's sufficient lighting. I've never had a problem with autofocus when shooting outdoors. I always had this impression that this lens sucks in video autofocus. But in today's test, I think it did really well on the GH6, still a contrast-based autofocus system. And if I get out of the frame, focus on the background and come back. Okay, doesn't look too bad. Get out of the frame. And back into the frame. Seems to be doing okay. Now I think about it, it might be because I always use the lens on the GX80, which has a pretty slow autofocus comparing to the G9 or GH6 in video, which led to my initial impression. That being said, the Leica 12 to 60mm is still much faster and more responsive in my video autofocus testing. .12 to 60mm at 15mm. This one is so much snappier. Instant lock on. Maybe because the maximum aperture at this focal length is only f3, but it does so much better. Again, 12 to 60. Grab onto the focus very nicely. doesn't really lose the focus here. Very responsive. That's good stuff. Yeah, that's very quick. In real life use case, whenever I need to shoot something more serious, I will bring the Leica 10-25 f1.7 lens. It covers wide angle to standard field of view as well as low light. In this case, I will never bring the Leica 15mm f1.7 on the second camera because the focal length as well as the aperture perfectly overlap. It makes no sense to bring another lens that does the same thing. So Leica 10-25mm with Leica 15 is a no-go combination for me. As I mentioned before, the Leica 15mm comes in handy when you don't feel necessary or comfortable bringing the 10-25 lens. What about Leica 12-60mm f2.8-4 lens in combination with the Leica 15? This way you get a wide focal range coverage, and the f1.7 aperture is going to guarantee you some nice low light and or bokeh shots. Ideally, you want even another prime lens that's maybe 25mm or even longer. But if you have longer prime lenses, maybe you could ditch zoom lens altogether. Imagine having 15mm f1.7 on one camera and a 25 or 42.5mm lens on another. Should cover most situations for prime shooters. What about Leica 8-18mm f2.8-4 lens in combination with the Leica 15? Actually, since they both emphasize on wide angle, I would rather go for a tighter prime to complement the 8-18. So this is perhaps not a combo I would use. As a zoom lens person, I still do not want to relinquish the control over focal length I have using zoom lenses. But this Leica 15mm f1.7 is really fun and adorable. It is handy lens for quick snapshots of moments in life in close range, thanks to the lovely bokeh and wide angle, small build, and its unintrusiveness. So is this lens for you? If you love shooting prime and wide angle street photography, this might just be perfect for you. Or even just use it as a casual B camera lens, permanently living on a small camera body like Lumix GX series. Bring it anywhere you go. I think it's brilliant for that. Overall, a brilliant lens that doesn't outshine its bigger brothers and sisters, the Leica 12mm f1.4, 42.5mm f1.2, or the Leica 10-25mm f1.7, but it is technically sufficient and photographically fun as it is. Thank you for watching.